Do you remember the empty highway, the screams, the creeper watching from the dark in Jeepers Creepers? It haunted your nightmares. But off-screen, the horror followed the cast into real life, marked by broken marriages, illness, quiet disappearances, and shocking transformations. This is what truly happened to them after the 2000s horror era faded. Jonathan Breck as the Creeper. Jonathan Breck was born on February 17, 1965, in Houston, Texas, United States. At 36 years old, he played the Creeper, the ancient winged predator driven by hunger and instinct in Jeepers Creepers, 2001. Covered in layers of prosthetics, his face vanished, so the creature could breathe. From that moment on, the monster would speak louder than the man behind it. Breck's early life unfolded in quiet pressure rather than chaos. Growing up in a middle-class Texas family, he was surrounded by expectations that valued discipline and practicality over imagination. Creativity existed, but it had to stay controlled, almost hidden. Over time, this tension taught him how to endure discomfort silently, how to keep doubts contained, and how to push forward without ever feeling fully certain of belonging. That internal restraint followed him into adulthood. Choosing acting meant living with instability, long stretches of uncertainty, irregular income, and the slow erosion of confidence that comes from repeated rejection. Relationships were difficult to sustain when survival demanded constant movement. Loneliness accumulated quietly as years passed without reassurance. When Jeepers Creepers finally brought recognition, it arrived with a cruel contradiction. Breck's physical performance was widely praised, yet his identity dissolved beneath the creature's design. Audiences remembered the silhouette, the wings, the stare, but not the man. Roles in Jeepers, Creepers 2, Star Trek Voyager, and Spy Kids 4. All the time in the world kept him working, yet the sense of invisibility never fully lifted. Today, Jonathan Breck is 61 years old and deliberately distant from Hollywood's noise. He continues to act and produce selectively, choosing control over exposure. With an estimated net worth of around $2 million, his life tells a quieter story. Gina Phillips as Trish Jenner. Gina Phillips was born on May 10, 1970, in Miami Beach, Florida, United States. At 31 years old, she played Trish Jenner, the fiercely protective sister and emotional anchor in Jeepers Creepers, 2001. Her performance carried fear, defiance, and instinctive strength. It was the kind of role that reveals what a person is made of under pressure. Her emotional foundation had been tested long before that film. Raised in a hard-working immigrant family, Phillips grew up watching effort outweigh comfort and responsibility arrive early. When her parents divorced, the fragile sense of security she relied on fractured, leaving her to navigate loneliness at an age when stability should have been constant. Independence became a shield, not a choice. That early loneliness resurfaced later in love. A deeply painful relationship left lasting emotional wounds, feeding anxiety and periods of quiet depression that never fully announced themselves. Even as her career progressed through projects like Ally McBeal and Boston Public, her private life felt perpetually unstable. Success existed, but it did not bring peace. Only the pressure to keep going despite exhaustion. Marriage offered grounding rather than escape. In 2009, Phillips married Lee Nelson, and motherhood reshaped her priorities, pulling her attention inward. The challenge was no longer survival alone, but balance, protecting emotional health while remaining creatively alive. Years of internalized pressure made that balance fragile, requiring deliberate distance from an industry that rewards constant visibility. Now Gina Phillips is 56 years old, living a quieter, more guarded life in Los Angeles. She continues to act and produce selectively, shaping work on her own terms rather than chasing momentum. With an estimated net worth of around $3 million, her story no longer feels like a climb. It feels like a careful rebuilding, piece by piece after learning how much strength survival can cost. Justin Long, as Derry Jenner. Justin Long was born on June 2, 1978, in Fairfield, Connecticut, United States. At 23 years old, he played Derry Jenner, the anxious, protective older brother pulled into a nightmare he cannot control in Jeepers Creepers, 2001. His youthful face and nervous energy made the terror feel uncomfortably real. That vulnerability had roots far deeper than the script. He grew up inside a strict Catholic household. With a philosophy professor as a father and a stage actress as a mother, Justin lived between discipline and performance, logic and emotion. School became a battleground rather than a refuge. His thin frame and awkward appearance made him an easy target for bullying, and ridicule slowly carved away at his confidence. Fear made him retreat inward, questioning his worth long before adulthood arrived. That insecurity followed him into early fame. When Jeepers Creepers unexpectedly launched his career, the pressure intensified instead of easing. Success came quickly, but so did the fear of being exposed as inadequate. Even while audiences laughed with him in dodgeball and accepted, anxiety lingered behind the humor. The praise never fully quieted the voice that told him he did not belong. His personal life mirrored that emotional instability. High-profile relationships with Drew Barrymore and later Amanda Seyfried brought visibility but little peace, collapsing under distance, scheduling conflicts, and emotional exhaustion. During this period, Long also struggled with anxiety and depression, intensified by relentless work and a constant need to appear likable. A later traumatic incident, being drugged and abducted during a film shoot, left lasting psychological scars and physical nerve damage, reinforcing how fragile safety could be. By 2026, Justin Long is 48 years old, living a markedly different life. Married to Kate Bosworth since 2023 and now a father, he has shifted toward selective acting, directing, and podcasting, including work on films like Barbarian and Tusk. With an estimated net worth of around $14 million, his story no longer revolves around proving himself. It reflects a man learning, slowly, how to feel safe inside his own skin. Brandon Smith as Sergeant David Tubbs. Brandon Smith was born on August 13, 1952, in Harris County, Texas, United States. At 49 years old, he played Sergeant David Tubbs, the weary small-town officer sensing danger long before it arrives in Jeepers Creepers, 2001. His presence felt grounded, restrained, and ominously calm. It was the kind of authority shaped by life, not performance. Smith's early years were defined by hardship rather than ambition. Raised in rural Texas by farming parents, he learned the weight of labor before he understood childhood freedom. Financial strain was constant, and arguments between his parents filled the house with tension that never truly lifted. Physical exhaustion arrived early, and emotional security was something he learned to live without. That background shaped his adult relationships. Marriage brought companionship, but also friction, especially as his struggles with alcohol surfaced during periods of stress. The addiction never exploded publicly, but it quietly eroded trust and nearly ended his marriage to Margaret Lawrence. What kept the relationship intact was not romance, but endurance. His career followed a similar pattern. Smith worked steadily but never extravagantly, appearing in projects like Powder and later Bernie, often playing men shaped by weariness rather than hope. Acting was not an escape from hardship, it was an extension of it. Even when Jeepers Creepers brought renewed visibility, his life remained modest, grounded in routine rather than recognition. Sadly, Brandon Smith passed away on October 27, 2023, in Houston, Texas, at the age of 71. His death came quietly, following years of health struggles that included a mild heart condition diagnosed in 2010. He was laid to rest without spectacle, leaving behind an estimated net worth of around $1 million, a reflection not of fame, but of persistence. Tom Tarantini as Roach. Tom Tarantini was born around 1960 in California, United States. At approximately 41 years old, he played Roach, the uneasy, blue-collar worker whose fear surfaces before words do in Jeepers Creepers, 2001. The role was brief, but his nervous presence lingered. It was the kind of performance that felt lived in rather than performed. Raised in a middle-class family, he grew up with parents who believed stability mattered more than passion. Acting was treated as a distraction, business as a necessity. That divide forced him to pursue creativity in fragments. That internal conflict followed him into adulthood. Entering Hollywood without family backing or industry protection meant years of marginal roles and constant uncertainty. He became accustomed to waiting for calls, waiting for chances, waiting for reassurance that never came. Even when he appeared in Jeepers Creepers 2 and later in films like Peaceful Warrior and Prom Night, momentum remained fragile, always one project away from disappearing. Marriage brought emotional grounding, but also strain. Long shoots kept him away from home, creating distance that tested patience and trust. Tarantini chose privacy over exposure, shielding his family from an industry that had already demanded too much. Today, Tom Tarantini is around 66 years old and largely removed from the public eye. His estimated net worth of about $500,000 reflects a career built on persistence rather than payoff. His story is not one of triumph or collapse, but of quiet compromise. The cost of choosing family and self-respect over a louder legacy. Patricia Belchure, as Giselle Gay Hartman. Patricia Belchure was born on April 7, 1954, in Helena, Montana, United States. At 47 years old, she played Giselle Gay Hartman, the weary psychic burdened by visions she never asked for in Jeepers Creepers, 2001. Her voice carried dread rather than theatrics. The character felt less like fiction and more like warning. B. That sense of weary authority did not come from training alone. Belchure's childhood forced her into adulthood early. Growing up in rural Montana, her family fractured when her parents divorced, collapsing the sense of safety that children instinctively rely on. Responsibility followed quickly. She became a caretaker to her younger siblings, learning how to manage chaos before she had the language to describe her own emotions. Those years taught her resilience, but they also taught her how to hide vulnerability when there was no space for it. That pattern carried quietly into her adult life. Belchure entered acting later than many of her peers. She gravitated naturally toward roles of authority: judges, doctors, administrators, officials. Not as a typecast accident, but because those characters mirrored the steadiness she learned to project in real life. Early film work like Flatliners offered visibility, while Jeepers Creepers anchored her presence in audiences' memories. Television roles on shows such as Bones and Good Luck, Charlie provided consistency, but beneath the steady credits lived an unspoken anxiety. That was the reason why she poured energy into work, using structure as protection. The absence of scandal masked years of quiet pressure, especially as she navigated an industry that rarely centers women who do not fit conventional molds. Acting became less about fame and more about survival through relevance. Now, Patricia Belchure is 72 years old, still active and respected across film and television. With an estimated net worth of around $1.5 million, her career reflects resilience rather than spectacle. Her legacy is not defined by one role but by decades of standing firm, carrying other people's stories while holding together her own. Eileen Brennan as the Cat Lady. Eileen Brennan was born on September 3, 1932 in Los Angeles, California, United States. At 69 years old, she played the Cat Lady, the fragile, unsettling woman whose brief encounter hints at the creature's cruelty in Jeepers Creepers, 2001. The role lasted only moments, yet it carried an eerie weight, amplified by the life Brennan had already lived. By then, she had nothing left to prove, only scars left to carry. Her early years were marked by pain that never fully loosened its grip. Growing up poor in Los Angeles, Brennan lived with a father whose alcoholism turned home into an unpredictable space, where fear replaced safety. She later revealed experiences of abuse that left deep emotional fractures, shaping her sense of worth and trust from an early age. Adulthood did not bring relief so much as transformation. Marriage to David John Lampson in 1968 offered hope of stability, but the relationship collapsed under emotional strain and financial pressure, ending in divorce in 1974 while raising 2 children. Professional success followed. Private Benjamin, Murder by Death, Clue. Yet personal life remained fragile, as if joy always came with a warning label. Physical trauma then rewrote her life entirely. In 1982, Brennan was struck by a car, suffering catastrophic injuries that required years of recovery and led to addiction to prescription painkillers. Just as she regained her footing, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, forcing another battle she never asked for. Sadly, Eileen Brennan died on July 28, 2013, at the age of 80 from bladder cancer at her home in Burbank, California. She left behind an estimated net worth of around $2 million, modest compared to her legacy. Remembered for Private Benjamin and Clue, she was laid to rest quietly, her life defined not by ease or luck, but by relentless resilience. Avis Marie Barnes as Trooper Weston. Avis Marie Barnes was born around 1960 in New Jersey, United States. At approximately 41 years old, she played Trooper Weston, the uniformed authority figure drawn into a horror far beyond protocol in Jeepers Creepers, 2001. Her role was restrained and grounded, reflecting a presence shaped more by survival than performance. She entered the film without spectacle, and that honesty stayed with her. Barnes grew up in a neighborhood where opportunity was scarce and resilience was mandatory. Poverty shaped her daily reality, and ambition had to compete with basic survival. Education became her escape route, but it was never guaranteed. Each step forward demanded effort, persistence, and sacrifice, especially in an environment where failure was expected more than success. That pressure followed her into adulthood. Breaking into acting meant navigating an industry that rarely waits, while carrying the weight of representing where she came from. Roles arrived slowly and often without recognition, reinforcing the fear that one misstep could erase years of effort. She learned patience not as a virtue, but as a necessity. Instead of retreating, Barnes expanded quietly. She continued building her craft, later appearing in projects like Waves and the upcoming F1, balancing acting with producing. Her career never exploded, but it endured. Each credit became proof that survival in the industry did not require constant visibility, only consistency. By 2026, Avis Marie Barnes is around 66 years old, working selectively. With an estimated net worth of about $800,000, her life reflects a career shaped by persistence rather than reward. Her story is not loud or tragic. It is steady, grounded, and hard-earned, defined by the quiet strength of someone who refused to disappear. John Bashara as Trooper Gideon. John Bashara was born on March 10, 1961, in Florida, United States. At 40 years old, he played Trooper Gideon, the alert state trooper trying to impose order on something that refuses explanation in Jeepers Creepers, 2001. His presence was brief but grounded, a human line of defense that felt thin by design. The calm in his performance carried the weight of lived unease. Bashara's early years were shaped by movement rather than roots. Frequent family relocations fractured continuity, forcing him to reset friendships, schools, and identity over and over again. Stability never had time to settle. He learned to adapt quickly, to read rooms fast, and to keep parts of himself packed away, skills that look like resilience from the outside but feel like quiet fatigue on the inside. That restlessness followed him into adulthood and work. Building an acting career meant accepting uncertainty as a constant companion, never knowing which role would arrive or vanish next. The lack of a fixed home base translated into a professional life spent chasing footholds. Small victories mattered because they were rare, and setbacks lingered longer than expected. Television offered structure where film did not. Work on Days of Our Lives provided rhythm and continuity, while projects like Common Sense Golf filled the gaps. Yet even with steady credits, the sense of being slightly unmoored remained. An actor always ready to move, because staying still never felt guaranteed. Today, John Bashara is 65 years old and working selectively as an actor and director. With an estimated net worth of around $600,000, his career reflects persistence more than payoff. Steve Rollerson as Cell Block Officer. Steve Rollerson was born around 1950 in Florida, United States. At approximately 51 years old, he played the Cell Block Officer, a hardened presence within the system, tasked with control where chaos already seeps through in Jeepers Creepers. 2001. His authority felt earned, not performed. It was the look of someone who had seen enough to stop asking questions. Growing up in Florida, Rollerson's early life unfolded without spotlight or shortcuts. The environment emphasized toughness and self-reliance, shaping a worldview where endurance mattered more than expression. Dreams were practical, ambition measured. Acting entered not as fantasy, but as work. Something to be done seriously or not at all. That mindset defined his career. He gravitated toward roles that carried weight rather than charm, often inhabiting men shaped by violence, institutions, or moral compromise. Films like Bully and later The Punisher reflected that gravity, placing him inside stories where power and consequence collide. The work was consistent but rarely comfortable. Personal life stayed guarded. Long hours on set and the demands of location shooting created distance, encouraging privacy as a form of protection. Rollerson avoided spectacle, choosing steadiness over exposure, even when louder visibility might have brought faster rewards. By 2026, Steve Rollerson is around 76 years old and largely removed from public attention. His estimated net worth of about $400,000 mirrors a career built on reliability rather than headlines. William Hayes as officer with hole in chest. William Hayes was born on June 18, 1966 in Tampa, Florida, United States. At 35 years old, he played the unnamed police officer with a hole torn through his chest. A moment of brutal, wordless shock in Jeepers Creepers, 2001. The image was fleeting, but unforgettable. It reduced authority to fragility in a single frame. He came from a working-class Florida family where survival mattered more than aspiration. Money was tight, expectations were practical, and dreams had to wait their turn. From an early age, Hayes learned how quickly security could vanish, shaping a quiet urgency to prove himself useful, capable, and dependable. That pressure didn't scream. It pressed steadily, year after year. Adulthood offered opportunity, but never comfort. Acting opened doors quickly for him, yet consistency remained elusive. He moved from featured parts to heavier roles, always adapting, never settling. Even as he appeared alongside major names and took on challenging performances, the fear of slipping backward lingered. Progress felt real, but never guaranteed. Marriage brought grounding without insulation. His wife, Bobby Huffman, became his closest anchor as long shoots and uncertain schedules tested emotional balance. Hayes kept working, television, film, supporting roles, choosing perseverance over pause. There was no scandal, no collapse, only the steady toll of carrying ambition without a safety net. Sadly, William Hayes died on February 11, 2016, in Safety Harbor, Florida, at the age of 49. The cause of death was never publicly clarified, leaving behind unanswered questions rather than closure. With an estimated net worth of around $300,000, his life ended quietly, Defined not by spectacle but by effort, a career built on willpower, and a presence remembered most in the moments where vulnerability cut deepest. Kim Kahana as camper driver. Kim Kahana was born on October 16, 1929, in the Hawaiian Islands. At 72 years old, he played the camper driver, a fleeting, grounded human presence on the road in Jeepers Creepers, 2001. The role was small, almost anonymous. Yet behind it stood a man whose life had already survived horrors far beyond fiction. His childhood unfolded against the shadows of war and poverty. Scarcity was constant, and fear was not imagined. It was lived. Those early years taught him endurance before they taught him hope, forging a toughness that would later become instinct rather than choice. By the time most people were discovering safety, Kahana was learning how easily it could disappear. Adulthood brought trials that bordered on the unimaginable. Serving as a paratrooper in the Korean War, he was captured, shot, and left for dead in a mass grave, saved only because a penny in his pocket stopped the bullet. He clawed his way out, returned to combat, and was later blinded for 2 years by a grenade blast, losing an eye in the process. Survival was no longer luck. It became a discipline that defined him. That discipline carried into love and work. Marriage to Sandra Kahana later in life brought steadiness, while his career transformed danger into craft. As a legendary stuntman and teacher, seen in films like Passenger 57 and Don't Be a Menace to South Central. While drinking your juice in the hood, he trained generations at Kahana's stunt school, turning near death into knowledge passed forward. Pain never vanished, but purpose grew around it. Kim Kahana died on August 12, 2024 in Monrovia, California, at the age of 94. The cause of death was not publicly disclosed. With an estimated net worth of around $1 million, he left behind more than credits. He left a lineage. Remembered as the General, he was laid to rest quietly, a man who survived wars, crashes, and graves, and still chose to teach others how to stand back up. They survived the screams, the shadows, and the nightmare on screen. But time brought a different kind of reckoning. Fame faded, lives changed, and some stories ended far too soon. So what part of Jeepers Creepers still haunts you the most today? If this journey into the lives behind the horror moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into the dark side of 2000 horror movies. Because sometimes the real story begins after the credits roll.